Good morning, friends and neighbors in Carolina land. Welcome to the Associated Budgets webinar. You may have noticed on the name of the event, it says, I think it says something like Associated Budgets for anyone who works with trust funds. So this isn't just for folks who actually enter trust budgets in Connect Carolina. This is for anybody who needs to understand how their budgets are being updated, their trust budgets. So I tell you that because if you know folks who need this information, we are recording this, and it would be great if you would share it with them, somewhere down the road. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm Nicole Shevick, and I am with Finance Business Analysis. I'm the BA for Commitment Control, and that is Associated Budget for Managed and Commitment Control. After this webinar today, you will know how your trust budgets are loaded. You will know how to identify if one of your trust sources is associated. You'll know how to identify if a revenue transaction is associated. So why did this revenue transaction trigger association and another one didn't? You'll also know which chart field stream expense budget journals will post to. And then finally, we'll make sure that you understand the ABC process. And I have a hint. It is easy as 1, 2, 3. Sorry, that was my funny. Okay, how are trust budgets loaded? So let's talk about this just to make sure you understand what you're seeing. So when I say how are budgets loaded, what I mean is, where does that beginning balance come from? So on some trusts, the budget office did this for you. So there was a process where they created a budget journal and that established your beginning budget. The beginning balance is the amount of carry forward from last fiscal year. Now on other trusts, you'll notice that unless you have entered a budget journal, you'll notice that the budget is 0. And that's because it's up to the departments to enter the budget to establish a beginning balance. So let's take a look at what happens. So in this case, what we're talking about is Trust 1 and Trust 2, so how budgets were loaded for sources that fall in the Trust 1 and Trust 2 rule sets. And if you're curious about which sources fall in those rule sets, there's a document called Budgeting 101, which is on CC Info, and you can find the ranges for the rule sets there. So if the source is associated, and we haven't explained what that means yet, but just, kind of for information, if the source is associated, then what will happen is that fiscal year imbalance, so the amount of money that was in that source as of 6/30/2015, that balance is loaded as the beginning budget. And that's based on the fund, the source, and the owning department. Okay, so they look at that combination of chart fields and they take the ending balance and they load that as the beginning budget. All right, and that budget will be loaded with account number 500-100. So we now have 2 accounts on Trust 1 and Trust 2. 510,000 and 500-100, and that is where all your budgets were loaded, were 500-100. That's an all other expenses account. This was, the budget office did this for you, and this was done, I was trying to look at my calendar and remember exactly, but it wasn't last week, but it was the week before, I believe. But this has been completed. When you look in Connect Carolina or an InfoPort for that matter, if you're looking on the transaction screen, the budget journal ID begins with the letters TRROL. And so that's unusual because normally we have 10 numbers, and in this case there are 5 letters that start the budget journal ID. And again, that's TRROL, and that's for the trust roll forward. All right, so you'll be able to identify that that was the budget journal that brought your beginning budget over. Now, if the source is not associated, then it's up to the departments to go ahead and enter the budget journal at any time because there's no carry forward. All right, and you can do that now. So now until the cows come home, or at least until June, you can go ahead and enter your budgets at any time on your trust sources. For our friends in athletics, student affairs, and UNC faculty physicians, those rule sets do not have associated revenue, so it's up to the department to enter those budgets. All right. So we said, things were loaded based on whether it was associated or not. So let's talk about what we mean. So our trust funds are categorized as either associated or non-associated. All right, so associated, what do we mean when we say that? So what I'm talking about is a relationship between the revenue side of the house and the expense side of the house. This applies only to trust funds. We don't have associated budgets on state funds or S&A or anything else. This is just trust funds. When it's associated, they are going to take that fiscal year-end balance and they're automatically going to carry that forward as the 7-1 budget, okay, which is what we just talked about on the budget load. Also, what will happen for those sources that are associated, the trust expense budget will be updated based on any revenue that comes in. All right, if you're not associated, there's no carry forward of the balances. So just like we were talking about, those non-associated sources, folks will have to go in and create budget if they want to. They'll have to do that themselves. But it also means that your expense budget is not updated when revenue is received, okay? So here's the question, right? All right, great. It's associated. I understand, relatively what it means, but how do I know if something is associated? So you have to look in the associated budgets table, which is in Connect Carolina. And here's the menu path right here across the top of the screen, okay? And when you get to the associated budgets page, you'll see this information in the ledger group. You want to select trust_rev. And this is easy because it is the only thing in the lookup. So you're guaranteed to get it right. And then you click on the search button, and that will take you to the associated budgets table. Now, what you'll want to do when you get into this table is click on the Find button right here on the right side, okay? Click on Find. And then you want to enter the source that you're looking for and click OK. And if that source is found, you'll see it on the top line. And you can see I have looked for source 50651, and there it is. Now listen, this really is, you know how people say if you blink you'll miss it? This is truly the case. This table goes fast. So you can enter that source and look away and come back, and it looks like nothing happened. But in fact, what it has done is the system has jumped to that line in the table, okay? So just be aware of that. It does happen very quickly. Now, once you find the source, you have to be aware of the budget period column, okay? The source must have a budget period of 2016. If it doesn't, it's not associated. It may have been associated in 2015, but if it does not have a 2016 row, it is not associated, all right? So this is the message you'll receive if the source is not associated. So in other words, it's not in the table, okay? It just says search string not found because that source isn't in there. One thing I will just point out while we're on this screen, if you notice this little icon here, this is where you can download to Excel. So if you wanted to download the entire table and then you could drop some filters on there and search by department, you could do that as well versus going source by source by source to take a look. Now, it's really important to understand how the table and how the association works, okay? So the association, and when I'm saying association, I'm talking about our revenue comes in the door, and we want it to create an expense budget journal to update our available balance, all right? So what the association looks at is the combination of fund, source, department, and program, all right? Account and cost codes don't matter. So whatever account number is used on revenue, whatever cost codes is used on revenue will not affect association. That's different than last year. It did affect it last year, but it does not this year, okay? So let's take a look at this. We're looking at source 71426. This source, when used with funds 28200 or 28201 or 28210, just as long as it's in the 282 family, this source, when used with fund 28200 or the family and with department 200-100, but without a program, is associated. Now here's the key. This is the thing that I think gets people the most confused about associated budgets, and that is that blank means blank. All right, it doesn't mean if I use program, if I don't use program, if I put program in there, I have to match program. It means I can't have a program on my revenue stream if I want that revenue to be associated. So my revenue has to come in with Fund 28200 or 28201, 28210, whatever the case may be, okay? Just like I said, as long as it's that 282 family, right? 282XX. I have to have that fund, I have to have this source, this department, and no program. If I have a program on that trust revenue, it is not associated. It will not trigger expense budget to be created. Now in this case, 15116, my fund 29100, again, as long as it's 291XX, the department has to be 200-100. Program has to be 1001. It can't be blank, and it can't be any other program. It has to be exactly 1001 in order for that revenue to be associated. All right, let's take a look at this. So let's look at this. Here we go. We've got this chart fill string up here. We're looking at source 71426. I just said something that needs repeating, and is it about blank means blank? Why don't we'll come back. Let's keep going. Okay, which revenue transactions are associated? So here we go. We have source 71426, it's associated, we've got this fund 28200 and department 200-100, but no program. So here's our chart field. We're using fund 28200, source 71426, account number is any revenue account number, and then this is our department, and that's the extent of our chart field string. So is this chart field string associated? And I can hear you out there right now screaming at me, yes, yes it is. And it's associated because it matches exactly what we have in the table, 28200, 71426. Remember I said account doesn't affect association, but it's a revenue account. It matches our department, and we're not using program. Here's our next one. 28200, source 71426, account is a revenue account. We have the department, and now we're using program 10,001. Is this revenue transaction, will it be associated? And I can hear you out there saying, no, Nicole, it won't be. And it won't be associated because there's a program used on this chart field. But when I look at the table, program is blank. Remember, blank means blank. It means we don't want anything with a program to become associated. Last one, 28200, 71426. Revenue account number, and now we're using a department 200-300 and no program. Is this chart field associated, this chart field string? And the answer is no, because the department is different. All right, 28300 is not the department that is in the associated budgets table. Let's look at one more example. All right, so we're looking at source Fund 29100, source 15116, department 200-100, and program 10,001. So here's our chart field, 29100, source 15116. We're good so far. We have our revenue account, and we have our department 200-100. But we didn't use program in this case. Is this associated? And you're right, I hear you, it's not associated because there's no program. We have to have a program. Next example, same fund, same source, department 200-100, and the program matches. Is this associated? You bet it is, because it matches exactly what's in the table. And then our last one, 29100, again, everything looks good, but our department does not match what's in the table. So no, it's not associated. And I'll just mention to you, just to reinforce what I had said earlier, if I had cost codes added onto this chart field, that would be okay, because account and cost codes do not affect association as long as the fund, the source, the department, and the program, if used, are the same. Okay? All right. So let's talk about automatic budget create. That's what ABC stands for, automatic budget create. All right. This is a process that updates your trust expense budget based on the revenue you receive. So when that revenue comes in and it matches the line in the table, it will create expense budget for you. This only applies to those sources that are in the associated budgets table. All right, so here's how ABC works. So the revenue transaction is going to get entered. That might be, it could be through a deposit. It could be a data collect batch. However your revenue comes in, the revenue comes in the door, and it will hit the recognized ledger. That's the revenue in InfoPort. If you were looking for this, it would be TR_RV_RE. Okay, that's the trust revenue recognized ledger. So then we have this nightly process. It's an automated process that goes and it looks at the recognized ledger and it looks for new revenue that has come in. And if it finds new revenue on a source that is associated, it will create an expense budget journal. Okay, so it's looking every single night. It doesn't do it on the weekends. It does it on the weekdays. So if revenue comes in Saturday and Sunday, it would be picked up in the process on Monday night. Okay. So here's how the math works. All right. So here we go. We've got the expense side of the house. And if you look, we have no budget, no pre-encumbrances, no encumbrances, but $1,000 in expenses. So our budget balance is negative $1,000. And then on the revenue side of the house, we have $3,000 that we just got in today, okay? And on the sources that are associated, this recognized revenue is going to trigger an expense budget journal, all right? So that $3,000 would get picked up in the batch tonight. It would update the expense budget for $3,000, and that's going to change our budget balance and available budget to $2,000. That's how the math works with associated budgets, all right? And that's what you're seeing when you see your trust budgets being updated and nobody's entering a budget journal. It's because the revenue has come in and is doing it for you. All right, so if you need to look at a particular budget journal, these are called the ABC budget journals. You would use these filters to do this. In Connect Carolina, you would go from the main menu to the finance menu, commitment control, budget journals, and enter budget journals. These are not transfers, so you would always look under enter budget journals. So you want to make sure that your business unit is UNCCH, that the journal ID is ABC, and just put ABC. You don't need to put anything else. And then clear your onion and hit search, because you didn't enter the budget journal, a system did. So clear your onion and hit search. And then it will return for you the search results, all right? And you're going to notice, if you haven't already, look down this list. And all of these start with the same thing and end the same way. It's the exact same journal ID. So it really is the date that makes the difference on these. So if you're looking at InfoPort and you see a budget journal transaction, you're going to see the journal ID in the trans ID column. You'll see this journal ID, an underscore, and then you'll see the date, okay? And that date is key if you come in here and you need to, for some reason, look at the actual budget journal in Connect Carolina. The date is going to make the difference, all right? That's how you know which one to look at. And without getting into too much detail, this is called a mask, this little ABC, and the way Connect Carolina PeopleSoft works, it uses the same mask every day. It's only unique if you have more than one in a day. So that's why we have the same journal ID, and we have to count on the journal date to distinguish one from the other. Now, there is one journal created each night for all of campus. So that's why, you know, everybody's going to have that same ABC and then the zeros 1, because everybody's journals are in the same, updates are in the same journal. So you can notice here that there were 109 entries on July 9th. We had 109 entries. So if you need to find yours to quickly get around the budget journal without having to go line by line, click on the Find button. Enter the source. This probably looks familiar. This looks similar to how we use the Associated Budgets table. You'll enter your source, click OK, and it will take you, notice we went to line 85. It takes you to that line in the table. It makes it the top line on your screen. And then you can take a look, and you can see the amounts, and you'll see that the amounts in Connect Carolina tie to the amounts in InfoPort. So here's the question, right? We've kind of got it in our minds now, like how our revenue has to look. Okay, our revenue has to match what we see on the Revenue tab, but once it does, where does the expense post to? Okay, because it doesn't necessarily post to the same chart field string as the revenue. So it's really important to understand this. So we're back here on the Revenue tab of the Associated Budgets table, and there's our source, 50651. So when you are looking at the table and you're on your source, click on the Expenditure tab. And that takes you, that's already has you on the right line, okay? And what you want to do is look at that chart field string, and you can see here's source 50651. So this chart field string, this is where the revenue will post, okay? It will post to this fund, 29200, source 50651. The revenue will always post to account 500-100, department 311-200, and program 10,000. There may not be a program on the revenue chart field string, and there can be a program on the expense. All right, they can be different. One does not have to necessarily mirror the other. Okay, they're often the same, but not always. So it's really important to understand that, because if you're looking and you say, well, we've got $3,000 in revenue, but we only have $1,000 in expense budgets. Why? Right? Well, you need to look and see where the revenue came in, and then you also need to make sure you understand where the expense is posting, okay, where the expense budget journal is posting. You'll need to do that in this table. Now remember, always, always, always look at the budget period. Make sure that you're looking at the right line. In this case, you can see right below this example that budget period 2015 is identical to budget period 2016, but in a lot of cases, people made changes. And so how something looked last year is not how it looks this year. So make sure that you look for budget period 2016. All right. We have plenty of time for questions, and I know you have them, so shoot.
All right, we have one that came in earlier. You can't hear me, so let me come over here. What would cause a trust to lose its status as associated from FY 2015 to FY 2016?
So there was a review process that the MOUs managed, and I guess people manage them in different ways. But what basically happened was a list of all of the sources, trust sources by MOU was provided. So when I say MOU for folks, I'm talking about, it stands for Major Organizational Unit, but we're talking about your main finance leads, okay, like your assistant deans or associate deans of finance, all right? And so there was a spreadsheet provided to them, and they vetted that spreadsheet and said, oh, these sources are no longer, shouldn't really be associated, let's take them off. These sources should be associated, let's put them on there. We've got the wrong department number, those types of things. And they basically did some cleanup, and that was what was loaded into the table with budget period 2016.
Okay, the next question is, if someone enters a chart field incorrectly on a revenue transaction, how do you ever locate the missing revenue or discover it is missing?
Well, you would have to, if they enter it incorrectly, if they're using a source, so I'm assuming they at least get the source right, okay, because that's the constant. And so as long as they get the source right, you can look up that source in InfoPort, and you can see how much revenue. It says connection to the teleconference has failed. Oh, okay. Okay, no worries. You can look up that source, and what I would do is I would probably go to the budget's overview in Connect Carolina, the budget's overview inquiry. And if you look at if it's associated, and if that trust fund has been associated from day one, okay, so like as of 7/1 it was associated, then your recognized revenue should match any new budget journals or any, your any new expense budget journals, okay? And so you would have to I would tie those back, and I would say, well, I know my roll forward was $25,000. That's how much carry forward we had. I have revenue of $5,000 recognized, but I only have $28,000 in budget. I should have 30, and I only have 28. Where's the other 2? And then you can actually drill down on the recognized transactions in the budget's overview, and you can then look at the chart field streams, and you pretty easily be able to identify the one or ones that weren't entered according to the table, to how they should be in the table. You can do that in InfoPort too. Honestly, I've been doing that more in the budget's overview. I'd have to think a little bit harder about how to do that in InfoPort. But, well, in InfoPort, you sort of have to sum them. You could run on the transactions tab. You could look at the ledgers. So, because, you can choose individual ledgers. So you would go in and look at TR_EX_BD, and that would show you your total trust expense budget. And then you could look at TR_RV_RE, and that shows you your trust recognized revenue. And then you could compare the two, and you'd pretty easily be able to figure out which one, where the missing revenue is. That's what I would do. I hope that makes sense.
Okay, here's a question that's come in. What if multiple checks were deposited on one day? Would only the daily total appear?
Oh, that's a good question. And yes, only the daily total. So there's one line for each trust or for each chart field stream. And so you've got 5 checks for $500 each. What you will see is one line for $2,500. It's a really good question.
Okay, here's another question. If associated revenue from last fiscal year was incorrectly associated with BBA, has the Budget Office manually calculated the BBA to carry forward correctly into 2016?
No, what they looked at was the ending fund balance. Okay, they said, what is the balance based on the fund, the source, and the owning department? And they rolled that forward. If you feel like your balance should be higher, you can enter an expense budget journal to increase it. There's absolutely nothing stopping you from doing that.
All right, here's another question. We have a number of employees that do not have access to the budget overview in Connect Carolina. Will the revenue show up in the Transactions tab on InfoPort or just the Ledger tab?
It shows up in both. So if you're on the Ledger tab, so you're looking at the main Ledger tab in InfoPort, you see revenue there. So that's at the top of the page. Like you have your revenue accounts and then you have your expense accounts. And so you would see revenue in the actuals year-to-date column. So InfoPort on the main Ledgers tab, it doesn't have a column that says like recognized revenue, but recognized revenue displays for you in the actuals year-to-date column. And then you could go into the Transactions tab, and again, when you're looking at your ledger filters, you want to look at TR_RV_RE, Trust Revenue Recognized Ledger, and that's where you can see the detailed transactions that make up the total on the main Ledgers tab.
Okay, we had a request that you repeat the information. Of course, I'm trying to remember which one it was.
Was it the blank means blank tab?
It was,
if you could type again real quick and tell us what you need, that would be awesome. I think it was the blank means blank tab. Woo! That gives me a headache running that fast through this thing. All right, I think this is the tab. I know we had questions on this tab.
so it was also to repeat the how you find something,
Sure.
the missing revenue. I'm sorry.
Oh, the locate. Oh, I answered that one then. Okay. Let me just, I do think this bears repeating, so let me just say this again. Look at this top line, all right? We're looking at source 71426. It's easy enough to go, all right, we used the right fund, we used the right department, but it is so important to understand that program has to be blank on the revenue. You can have program on the expense and it not be on the revenue, okay? It's absolutely, they relate to each other, but they're separate of each other, all right? And so you really have to understand in this case, if anybody puts in, it comes in through a deposit or, like I said, data collect batch, it doesn't matter. If that revenue comes in the door with a program, it will not trigger the creation of an expense budget journal because that chart field string isn't part of the table. It has to be blank. Anytime this source is used, the program has to be blank in order to create expense budget. And that is something that has, with a similar thing to what we had last year, and it really caused the most confusion last year. So blank really does, it has a meaning. It means that it must be blank, not that it's optional.
Sorry. The request to repeat was to explain what the TR_RV_RE means.
So that's the trust. So you know how we have all these buckets, right? Like where we've got our budget bucket and our encumbrance and pre-encumbrance and expense buckets. We also have buckets on the revenue side. So these dollars here that you get in on this chart field string we're looking at here on the screen, those dollars will come in and will sit in the trust revenue recognized ledger. And the way you identify that ledger is through the letters TR_RV_RE. And that's what you see, like when you're on the Transactions tab in InfoPort and you have the option to see the detailed ledgers, not just the ledger group trust, but the actual detailed ledgers that make it up, that's the one you want to look for when you're looking at the recognized revenue.
Okay, we have a couple new questions that have come in.
I love it.
So if associated revenue was incorrect in 2015, how do I verify what my balance should have been on 6/30/15? My roll-up is incorrect in InfoPort. How do I control date parameters on the budget overview?
So let's take that one at a time. There were like 3 questions in there. So if associated revenue was incorrect in 2015, how do I verify what my balance should have been? Well, I mean, frankly, you'll have to just do the math. I mean, first of all, the associated revenue worked in 2015. It worked exactly as it was designed to work. We just did not fully understand how it was designed to work. So it did work, and it is correct based on but it may not be correct based on what you were thinking. So for example, revenue may have had a program and it shouldn't have had a program, right? And so it wasn't recognized. It wasn't associated. What I would encourage you to do is to look at, you could really spend a lot of time trying to tie these things back and get very confused. Or you could look at your ending budget for FY15, you could look at your total revenue and say, I wish that this total revenue had been recognized. Excuse me. I wish that the total recognized revenue had been associated. See, now I'm talking 2015 lingo, not 2016 lingo. And you could create an expense budget journal for that full amount to kind of true up what you think the balance would be. That's what I think you should do. I would look at that, and you know best the business process around that trust source. And if you feel like the total amount of recognized revenue should have also been associated in 2015 but wasn't, then do a true up and create your own expense budget journal to make that number what you think it should be. That's what I would do. Now the next question was, my roll-up is incorrect in InfoPort. So if you're looking at the ledger roll-up in InfoPort, if you're not seeing budget, and maybe you're saying it's incorrect because you're not seeing budget, then that trust source isn't associated, so there is no budget. It's correct based on what is in Connect Carolina. So now, if you don't like what you're seeing in Connect Carolina and you feel like you need to do a true up, then you do that in Connect Carolina and you'll see that in InfoPort tomorrow. But how that's displaying in InfoPort, those numbers are correct. And then you said, how do I control date parameters on the budget overview? So that's a really good question. So when you're on the budget overview inquiry, and that's a report in Connect Carolina, you'll notice that there is the detail, there's some different types of count reports that you can use on there, and you want to set yours to the detail summary period. That's what we use at Carolina. We don't use the other ones. And so your budget period, you could just change that to be 2015 to 2015 to see exactly what happened last year, and then your budget period 2016 to 2016 to see exactly what's happening this year. So that's how you would do that on the budget's overview.
Okay, here's a new question. If revenue was not entered on the correct chart field string, are corrections required?
They're not required, no. But if you want that revenue to increase your expense budget, then you would need to do someone would need to do a correction on the revenue actual, to get it on the right chart field string. But no, it's not required.
Okay, here's someone who missed the beginning. When I go to the associated budget screen and pull up our department number, all of the accounts are showing a budget period of 2015. Does that mean I don't have any sources that need associated budget?
If every line has budget period 2015, that means you don't have any trust sources that are associated for 2016. Now, whether or not they need to be associated is a management decision. What it means, though, is that you don't have any that are associated for this fiscal year.
All right, here's a new question. Can a fund source combination be associated with more than one program or department?
Who's asking that question? Yeah. Kelly Smith. Why do you want to ask me hard questions, woman? Yes, it's not hard. It's just, yes, it can be. Their athletics, for example, has a fund source combination that's associated with more than one department, but that is done because of their very specific business process. So only athletics was allowed to do that. That's not an option that was opened up to the rest of campus. So, but yes, technically it can be done.
Okay. CSW Green, we may have to get back to you because it sounds like your questions are very specific, and maybe we can help you with that offline. Here comes another question. Do you have to associate your budget every year? If so, why isn't our associated budget automatically set for each year?
So no, you don't have to make changes every year. But again, what happened was, there was a list of the sources sent to your MOU lead, and everybody, I don't know how each group did it, but they ran a vetting process and looked at things and said this should be, these sources are associated and should stay that way. These sources are associated and should no longer be, or
some sources are not associated and should be. So if you've noticed a change in association between 2015 and 2016, that was a decision that was made, at the MOU level.
All right. Any other questions? Type them into the chat window, and we will address them as quickly as we see them. Somebody's typing.
I thought I saw something about budget period and the date somewhere. Will you scroll up just a little bit? I can do that, but I can't target the specific date of 6/30/15. Hey, so if you're talking about, there's a question that says, I think we were talking about the budget's overview and putting the dates in the budget's overview. You can't target a specific date on the budget overview ever. That's not how it works. So when you put in budget period 2015 to budget period 2015, that automatically is a 6/30 end date because it's giving you the total for that entire budget period. So by default, it's a 6/30/15 end date.
She went on to say the revenue is not associating correctly in InfoPort.
Put in a help ticket. I have to tell you, I have yet to see that be the case, but it may very well be. So put in a help ticket, and we'd be happy to look at it for you.
So Chrissy is saying, I have over 60 associated trusts, and about half were not associating correctly in 2015, and we'll definitely need some help tackling this issue. If we're,
Chrissy,
put in a help ticket.
Fran, honey, put in a help ticket. It'll get to me. They send me all the budget stuff, and I'll help you. We'll get through it together. And then you can buy me a margarita.
All right, here's a new question. When will we get another chance to change whether or not we want a fund to be associated?
So you can do that at any point. I mean, you have to put in a help ticket. If you want something to be associated that's not, you need to enter a help ticket. We'll have to check with the MOUs to make sure that that's okay. We kind of have to go through a little bit of a approval process of our own. And then if it is okay, we'll set up the association. Now here's the key, what you have to understand. Trust budgets have already rolled, all right? Carry forward has already been brought from 2015 into 2016. So if you associate something now, it's up to you to go and put in a beginning budget if you want one, okay? If revenue has come in the door from 7/1 until today, and your source gets associated tomorrow, if you want that revenue to be part of your expense budget, it's up to you to figure out what that number is and to enter an expense budget journal. So you can put in the help ticket, and we'll update the table so that all this, ABC will work for you, and and then next year it would be associated, but you will have to do the work to get your budget where it would have been had you been associated at the beginning of the fiscal year.
Okay, here's a suggestion. Before you post this presentation on CC Info, maybe add a few screenshots of how the revenue will appear in InfoPort on the Ledger tab and the Transactions tab.
That's a good suggestion.
All right, any other questions? Let's see, the person who was asking about adding another chance to change a fund is saying, actually, I'd rather unassociate one.
Oh, yeah.
If possible.
You can do that, too. It works both ways. It's a swinging door.
All right, we have plenty of time for additional questions. Any other questions? Type them in the chat window. I see we have a person typing, a couple people typing, so go ahead, and we will wait for your question to come in.
Does that say 1,010 people?
No.
Oh. I knew I read it wrong, but that would be nice.
We had about 115 at one point. What is a true-up?
Oh, okay, that's a good question. So a true-up is when you, okay, let me give you an example. I'm sure you've never done this. But I look at my checkbook, and I'm like, I am off $5.68. Now, I can spend 4 hours trying to figure out why I'm off $5.68, or I can enter a line in my checkbook as a true-up. And that way, I'm right and the bank's right. And I just kind of take it as a day and I start over. Now, if I think the bank's wrong, I'm going after that $5.68. But that's another story. That's what a true-up is. I mean, you're literally looking at your budget and you're saying, all right, well, you know, my budget is $25,000, but we had $30,000 in revenue last year. All of it wasn't associated. I wish it would have been. So let me figure out the difference and let me enter a budget journal to true up the balance, to kind of to right the ship, if you will. Let me see if I can think of another analogy. I can't. That's what a true up is.
All right, here's a new question. Oops, slipped off my screen. Give me one sec. Basic question. What is the benefit of having a trust associated or just leaving it not associated? Oh,
that's such a good question. It is a basic question, but it's a good one. So it really is about control. So we have, so there are some folks who made a decision that they don't want their budgets associated because they give a department or a unit a very set budget. They say, this is your budget. Your budget is $50,000 this year. Like you have an overtime budget of $50,000 on this trust fund, and that's it. And it doesn't matter how much money comes in the door this year. That's your budget, right? So you might bring in $100,000, but we're gonna bank that other $50. I don't want you to look at that and think it's yours to spend. And so that's kind of that's the difference. Like if it's associated, you want to say my spending authority is equal to how much money I'm bringing in, right? Kind of like your checkbook, right? You can spend however much money you're bringing in the door. And so, but if you don't have something associated, you're saying, this is my expense budget, and regardless of what happens on the revenue side, it doesn't matter.
Okay, on a related budget topic, some of us are having an issue where state budgets for 2016 aren't showing up in InfoPort. Hold on, it just slid off the screen. Any word on how things are going in collecting that?
Michael Smith, this is a trust webinar. Yes, I'll answer your question. So they are in InfoPort. The problem is we don't know how to see them in InfoPort. And I've actually, I've got a document out for review that we'll be sending out really, really soon. But here's the answer. When you go into InfoPort, go to the main ledger tab. You choose state as your ledger, and you want to choose fiscal year 2017 and budget period 2017. And if you choose that, you will see your permanent state budget for next year.
Okay, will Connect Carolina prevent invalid chart field combinations in the associated budgets? For example, if someone else entered the wrong fund with their source, will this be caught and not allowed to go forward?
So there's a combo edit. I mean, a fund and a source has a specific fund that it can work with. So that would be, that would be caught through combo edit.
I have an old trust that I have always had to roll the funds over to the new fiscal year. When I click into Budget Journal to roll the funds to the new year, it will not allow me to edit. Does that mean my security level needs to be changed?
When you click into, you can't edit a budget journal. You could create a new budget journal, but you can't edit a budget journal that's already been created. I may not fully understand your question, Ruth, but if you have access to the budget journal page, then you can enter a budget journal. But no, you can't update something that's been posted.
Okay, somebody's saying not next year, the state budget for this year.
Well, now the state budget for this year, College of Arts and Sciences, is a different story. So this year, when we look at our state budget, we have to use fiscal year 2015 and budget period 2016 because the budget entry was made in fiscal year 2015. The problem right now is being able to see your budget to actuals because your dollars that we're spending have a fiscal year of 2016, not 15, right? So like you can't see them all. So there is a request has been made and it has been programmed and tested, and they're getting that. It'll probably be in there tomorrow. I don't think Scott would mind if I said it, but to allow a multi-select on the fiscal year filter on the main ledgers tab, because right now you can just select one filter. So you can see like your budget for this year, or you can see your dollars spent for this year. You can't see those because of how that filter works, and that is being fixed. So what you'll have to do in order to see your full picture for state funds for 2016, you'll have to have fiscal year 15 and fiscal year 16 selected, and only budget period 2016. And I know it's a lot of talk and it's a lot of clicking and it's kind of confusing, but I've got a document put together to explain it. It'll be out really, really soon.
Okay, we have...
Yeah, I want it fixed too. Sorry. I just saw that. Yep, me too.
We have more time for questions, so do we have any additional questions?
These are really good questions, y'all. That's great. Good questions.
We'll give it a couple more minutes to see if anybody else has an additional question. I don't see anybody typing right now, so we'll give it another minute or so to see if anyone else has any additional questions. I definitely appreciate you being here today, and we'll be posting this on CC Info early next week. I hope you've had a chance to look at the new resources page on CC Info. We've done a redesign on it and tried to group things in like sections so that all the materials related to one topic are together. All right, so to associate a budget to a trust fund, we have to submit a journal entry?
No, to associate a budget, if you have a trust fund that's not associated and you want it to be associated, you need to enter a help ticket. That's something that has to be done behind the screen. There's like a little man, like in Oz. It's actually a little woman. It's me. And you have to go and do some stuff behind the scenes to make that happen. So enter a remedy ticket. But when you do that, you know, you need to check with your MOU lead first, because I'm going to have to go back and do that. And if you can go ahead and like get permission from whoever that is to say, yeah, this can be associated, and then include that in the email string, that would be awesome. It'll make it go a lot faster.
All right. Any additional questions? We still have some time left that we could take your questions. Just type it into the chat box and we will read it as quickly as we can when it comes in.
This is what I want to sing, like, it's the final countdown. Like I always have music going in my head.
All right. I see somebody typing. It looks like the college is typing in additional questions, so we'll wait for that to come in. But please go ahead and submit any additional questions that you have. Also, while we have time, I want to mention that we have a town hall a week from today. Next Thursday, we will be holding a town hall at Genome Sciences, room G100 at 1:30. So please spread the word about that. Yes, we will webcast it, but we'd love to have you come out in person as well. That's always a great experience to have a room full of folks as we talk about some new things and some things coming up in the future for Connect Carolina and Infoport. That's a town hall a week from today at Genome Sciences G100.
So at like 1 o'clock.
1:30, yeah. And all the details are on the CC Info website, as so much is. All right, here's a new question. For non-associated trusts, how would we enter in the budget journal to establish carry forward? Would this be a one-sided entry?
Yes. It's a one-sided entry. So if you figure out whatever your ending balance is and then enter the budget for that amount.
What is trans ID beginning with TRROL?
Oh, I haven't. I was just going to mention that again. That's what you see for the trust roll forward. So the budget journal that created the carry forward for all of the associated trust funds, the first 5 letters of that budget journal are TRROL, so trust roll.
Okay, there's a request to include the Q&A. So this is, we've just recorded this webinar, and that's what gets posted. So you can get the Q&A by viewing the recording of the webinar. And that, as I said, that should be posted on CC Info early next week. It takes a little while for the recording to process and then for us to get it posted on the website, but we do try to do it as quickly as possible. All right, we'll wait another minute or so to see if we have any additional questions. Writing out the questions would be helpful. I understand, but as I said, we record the webinar the way it happens, basically. So it's a little bit difficult to add anything to it, but we'll definitely see if maybe we can create a supplementary document that has the Q&A. We will try to see if we can do that. All right, last call for any additional questions. If you have a question, please go ahead and type it in the chat box, and we will wait another couple minutes. Okay, somebody is asking, how was the TRROL calculated? I have an example of one that is incorrect. I submitted a help ticket.
It was calculated based on the ending balance for the fund, the source, and the owning department. So if there are balances in other departments, that wouldn't be taken into account. It's based on the fund, the source, and the owning department.
Okay, last call for questions. Don't see anyone typing. So we will wrap it up.
Okay. Y'all, it's been fun. I always enjoy the opportunity to talk about budgets. I actually think they're kind of exciting. All right, I'll see you guys on the other end of the help ticket. Thanks for tuning in.